penultimate talk of the day is from Dr. Bronwen Martin. We'll hand over to her in a moment after a brief introduction. So Bronwen Martin is a scientific editor and research, communication and outreach coordinator in the Faculty of Pharmaceutical, Biomedical and Veterinary Sciences at the University of Antwerp. Bronwen will be talking about ways that you can get your scientific writing published. So over to you, Bronwen.
That's great. Thank you very much. I hope you can see my slides okay. Thanks everyone for joining the conference. I must say I've learned a tremendous amount already. It's been very informative and I've really enjoyed it. Also a special thank you to the Hello Bio team for organizing so many useful resources for researchers. So my name is Bronwen Martin. I work at the University of Antwerp in Belgium. For those of you maybe not very familiar with Antwerp, Antwerp is a relatively small city in Belgium, and it's famous for chocolate, beer, and diamonds. So it's quite a fun place to visit if you've never been. And today I'm going to be taking you through some diverse writing outlets that can really help you to enhance the reach and influence of your work. So researchers spend a lot of their time doing research and collecting data, and the main way of communicating this data is through scientific papers. And obviously scientific papers play a crucial role in disseminating data, and they're very, important for career progression and have, lots of pros for disseminating data. But there are also some drawbacks to only communicating your research through scientific papers. And what are these drawbacks? Some of these drawbacks include paywalls. So a lot of your research data will be stuck behind a paywall, so people would have to pay to view your findings. Often the research papers are written in very technical language with quite a lot of jargon, so only really other researchers or even only other researchers within your field would likely understand what's written in those papers. And therefore, these research papers tend to have a limited reach, and that reach tends to be mainly other researchers working in your field. So why should we explore diverse writing outlets? Simply put, it's basically about expanding the reach and impact of your work. So basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to reach a much broader audience. And this audience can range from researchers out of your field, policymakers, companies. Perhaps you're looking to start up a collaboration with a company or get funding from a company. So you want to really sort of get your research out there so that the company can sort of know what you're working on. Students, perhaps you work at a university and you want to try and recruit students or PhD students to come to your university. Funding agencies, perhaps you want to, really show funding agencies what it is that you're working on and how you're using the funds, etc. Venture capitalists, healthcare professionals and patients, that's an important one. Often there'll be healthcare professionals working in hospitals that might not have access to your latest findings, and it would really help if they could find it. And just the general public. And also what it does is it enhances visibility of your work. So you really then have an opportunity to showcase your expertise and to create connections and collaborations beyond your academic circles. And as we saw from Elodie's talk right at the beginning, creating these connections is actually a very important part of being a scientist, and using diverse writing outlets is basically also another way of making these connections. So then the question is, which types of writing outlets are there? So there are many different types of writing outlets. So for example, there is social media, for example, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. Then there are blogs, there is the popular press, there are magazines, and books, for example. So there are many different types of writing outlets to choose from. And what I'll do is I'll take you through some general sort of writing tips for each of these outlets and how you can try and hone your writing for these different writing outlets. So before we go into each of the specific writing outlets, what I'd like to try and do is just give you some very general science writing tips. These are general science writing tips that can really be used in all types of writing outlets. And they also sort of feed forward from what the tips that Jasmine really sort of nicely detailed in her presentation. And this is sort of just another format of those. So when you start writing for a more of a popular science writing outlet, one of the first things that you need to do is you need to sort of spark curiosity. So you want people to be interested in what it is that you have to say. What is your message? So really think about your title. For example, if you're writing a blog article, think about a catchy title, because you really want to draw in people into what it is that you have to say. So spend a bit of time thinking about what it is that you want to say and then come up with a catchy title. Yes, keep it simple. That's often something that scientists struggle with. They'll often make things overly complicated. Then try and tell a story. People are interested in who you are as a scientist. Why did you become interested in the topic that you're studying? So use examples. For example, if you're studying the genetic factors that determine aging in a population in Italy, tell that story. Talk about the people that you're studying in Italy and what it's like to live there, and make it personal and why you're interested in that research. Use short sentences. This is often something that a lot of researchers tend to sort of forget, and they tend to have like really long sentences with lots and lots of commas in between. And by the time you get to the end of the sentence, you think, oh, what is this sentence? So use short sentences, break things down into short paragraphs, and use headings, because that really makes things a lot easier to read and to digest. Also, don't forget people are busy, so when they're reading these popular science articles, perhaps it's in the evening or after work, so you don't want to overload people with too much information. Also add quotes. For example, pull out a quote where you say, oh, I really enjoyed my internship in Italy because I learned completely different techniques. So don't be afraid to add in a quote. And then one thing that's very important is to use good quality visuals. So really take the time to take some good photos or find the nice image. Perhaps you have a fancy confocal image, but really sort of choose something that is going to catch people's eye, because often that will be the first thing that people will look at. They'll say, oh, there's a nice picture, photo. What is this? I'd like to learn more about this topic. So often what you'll see is researchers will sort of put like quite a technical or graphical image. Try and avoid that and have something that's good quality and immediately sparks curiosity in people. Try and make your content shareable via social media, because then what you do is you enable your content to be shared across different platforms and seen by many different people. And also for blogs, and this is also something that Elodie actually mentioned in her talk, is add in a little bit of information about yourself at the end of the blog. Who are you? How can people contact you? Because don't forget, a lot of this is about networking. So make sure that there's a little bit of information about you, where you are, and how people can get in touch with you. Because perhaps they'll read your article and think, oh, I have a question, or I'd like to collaborate with this person. So make sure that it's easy for them to know who you are and how to contact you. So social media is a good place to start because it has a very wide reach and the platforms are free to use. There are many different social media platforms to choose from. So then often it can be a bit overwhelming because then you think, okay, where do I start? So then the first thing to do is to really identify if there's a specific audience that you specifically want to reach. So let's say that you are interested in collaborating together with a company or that you need help from a company to sort of like bring your research further. Then, for example, LinkedIn would be a good place to start because there's lots of companies on LinkedIn. If you say, well, I'd like to try and engage with policymakers, and I'd like to sort of try and engage with other researchers, then I would say that Twitter would be a good place to start. If you have nice images and you enjoy taking photographs and you do a lot of research that produces a lot of nice images, then Instagram is a perfect place to start, because Instagram is very focused on images with very short pieces of text. The nice thing about Instagram is it's owned by the same group, so Meta. So Instagram and Facebook are part of the same platform. So if you post something on Instagram, then you can also automatically put it on Facebook. So you sort of hit two audiences at the same time. Now, for social media, these are just some very general tips. I don't have time to go into great detail, but for the writing style, a couple of tips that you need to remember. First of all, brevity is key. You really don't want to be writing long texts for social media. So you really want to write short, impactful posts where you convey one idea in one post. Try and use hashtags because that will increase your discoverability. So for example, if you work in the aging field, make sure that you always add in the hashtag aging. And then also try and get some engagement for your social media posts, where you can mention people or tag a company or tag your collaborators, because then they might comment on your post or they might share your post. So that's a way of getting extra reach and getting extra visibility for the texts that you then put on social media. Another one that I'm actually very fond of is blogs. So how can blogs help you to extend the reach of your research? Blogs are basically a great way of increasing connectivity, because you can reach many different audiences outside of academia, and they basically allow you to make new connections with people. They're also a lot more flexible than social media in that the format can be longer, so you can actually write more. And they're also a lot more flexible with the amount of images or photos that you can add in, where you can put in the photos. You can even add in some video content. And then the nice thing about blogs is you can have links to your papers or links to your website. And then you can also share these blogs through all the social media platforms. And blogs are basically a great way of sharing insights, sharing discoveries, and really sort of bringing your own personal perspective to things. There are many different blog platforms out there to choose from. So either you could try and write a blog for an existing platform, be a guest blogger, or now it's also possible to create your own blog, for example, by using WordPress. WordPress actually has some really nice templates, and with a little bit of web editing savvy, it's quite straightforward to actually make your own blog. So that's a good way of creating more visibility and sharing your research findings. So an excellent example of a great blog is the Hello Bio blog. Personally, I really like it. I think it's a very useful resource. It features many different topics from many different researchers. And you'll also notice that the blogs are written in a very sort of engaging and accessible style. So they're sort of very easy to understand, and they have lots of interesting tips. So they're actually very nice to browse through. Also, being a guest blogger for Hello Bio is a great way to increase your visibility and for networking. A while ago, I wrote a blog article for Hello Bio about open science, because open science is something that I'm very, very interested in. And after my blog article, I had quite a few people contact me, and I've made a lot of new connections, and I got a couple of opportunities to work on some open science initiatives. So for me, it's really sort of opened up quite a few opportunities. So I would say definitely give blogging a go and see where it takes you. So another option besides social media and blogging are press articles. Now this can be a little bit more tricky than social media and blogging, because you need to attract the attention of the press. But the writing tips that we've gone through earlier are also very applicable to writing for press articles. So here we're talking about, for example, newspaper articles. And I would advise what you would first need to do is you would need to write a pitch to the press and try and write a press release. So I would say that the first thing that I would suggest you do is to connect up with your university press office and with your press officers and talk to them about, hey, you know, I've got these interesting research findings. Can we try and write a press release? Could you help me with this? Perhaps they can already give you some examples of how to write a good press release, or perhaps they can help you with that. Another thing that you should definitely do is to offer your expertise in expertise databases. For example, at the University of Antwerp, we have an expertise database where you as a researcher put in a little bit of information about yourself, some keywords related to your research, for example, aging, neuroscience. And then if journalists are looking for a scientist that they need for a specific press article on a certain topic, for example, if it's World Dementia Day coming up, then they'll do a search in that database, and then they'll perhaps find your name, and then they'll contact you, and then you can work with that journalist to write an article. So I would definitely sort of suggest that you do something like that as well. Now for the press, it's very, very important that you communicate your findings in plain language. And I would say it's one of the most common mistakes that I see researchers doing is where they are just too technical in their writing, that the writing is just too much filled with jargon and heavy technical language. And for the researcher, because that's all they've known, to them it makes perfect sense, but to an outsider they might think, I have no idea what you're talking to. What is this in vitro drug that you're testing? It doesn't make sense to me. So really take the time to make sure that you can communicate your findings in plain language. And you also want to highlight the impact of your research. So really emphasize the real world impact of your research. Those are two good tips to get started for the press. Then you could also try and pitch your research to various science magazines. For example, Danielle mentioned about pitching her research to a science magazine. And that's definitely something that you could also do. One that I quite like is The Conversation. It's quite a famous magazine. They do really nice topics. And then it's a matter of basically taking your research and writing an interesting pitch where you simplify your research, highlight the impact of it, and then see if, for example, The Conversation is interested in you working together with their team in writing an article for them. There's also New Scientist, Scientific American, Wired. Here in Belgium, we have EOS Magazine, which is also a very nice one. They even have their own blog site. Sometimes our PhD students are invited to write blogs for EOS Magazine. So check out the popular science magazines that are out there. You can connect up with their science writers and their journalists, for example, through Twitter or by email, and try your luck at sending out a pitch and see if they're interested in perhaps writing about your work. They're also a good starting place to learn how to write good popular science articles. So I would suggest to regularly sort of browse through these magazines and look at topics that are similar to your topic and just see how those journalists write, what writing style they use, and how they can make complex topics simplified, because often it's a very good starting point to learn how to do that yourself. So just in a nutshell, to summarize, here are some handy tips to get you righted, to help you with your writing. So focus on diversifying the writing outlets that you choose. So don't just put all your effort into writing scientific papers. You've put so much time and effort in your research. You've put so much time and effort into then getting it published. Then put in that little bit of extra effort to then also simplify your findings and publish them in other writing outlets. And this can be social media, this can be in blogs, this can be in press articles, science magazines, or even in books or book chapters. Perhaps, you know, it might be your ambition one day to write a popular science book, or to write a chapter in an encyclopedia, for example, an encyclopedia of neuroscience. There's lots of options out there. So don't be afraid to explore the options and to hone your writing skills. Because, like Jasmine mentioned, to have good writing skills is really important, because you can then also use those good writing skills for writing your grants. Because if you can explain things clearly for a blog or on social media, you'll likely be able to do the same for your grant application. The number one thing to think about is to be clear and simple. So really avoid jargon and make your writing easy to understand. And as I said, as someone who reads a lot of other people's writing and works on editing it, I would say it's the number one mistake that I see, is that the writing is just too complicated and too technical, and that a lot of people just won't understand it. So really just keep it clear and simple. Know your audience. So adapt your style to your audience. If you're trying to reach companies, write in a style that would attract companies. If you're trying to reach students, then perhaps put in information that is interesting to students. So really think about first, who's my audience and how am I going to reach them? Then try and engage your readers by telling a story. I think it's human nature to be interested in a story. So use a clear narrative and find your own voice. As was mentioned in some of the previous panels and talks, there's lots of tools now to help you write, like ChatGPT and Grammarly. And these are all fantastic tools, and I would say embrace them. But I would also say be careful that your voice doesn't become the voice of ChatGPT. So find your own voice. It can often take a while to find that voice, but find your voice and your writing style, and then that's unique to you. Use examples in your writing. So always illustrate your points with real life examples. For example, if you've done field work somewhere, or if you've spent time in a different country, or if you've interacted with patients that suffer from the disease that you're researching, you know, use examples and add these examples in your writing. And always try and enhance your writing with good visuals. Text is important, but don't forget that the human eye is drawn to visuals. So you want to try and catch people's eye with a good photo or a good visual. So spend a bit of time in taking a good photo. And for example, if you're in the lab and you're doing an interesting experiment at that time, take a photo of the experiment, because you never know, you might be able to use that on your blog or on social media, or even for the press article. So enhance with visuals, that's very important. So creating diverse writing outlets not only increases the reach of your research, but it can also create new opportunities and connections. And you'd be surprised often by how many new opportunities you can create by just writing a simple blog article. For example, I have a colleague who wrote an article in a very popular science magazine. She was then contacted by an artist in a completely different country who said, "Oh, I'm very fascinated by your work. Would you like to collaborate on this art meets science project?" And then they collaborated, and then they ended up having a beautiful art installation at the University of Antwerp. So you never know sort of where your scientific writing will lead you. So see it as a way of networking, see it as a way of creating opportunities, and just getting your research out there. So I think that's one of the most important things to think about, is it's not just about honing your writing skills, but it's also about creating opportunities. So remember, effective science writing is not just about disseminating information, but it's also about making connections. And it's these connections that basically also determine a lot of our career and our career path. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there, to write about your research and to make these new connections. So yeah, we've come to the end. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, and also special thank you to Hello Bio for everything that you do for researchers. I know that I definitely appreciate it, so thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Bronwen. That was absolutely brilliant, and a great follow on from Jasmine's talk earlier as well. And we've got a couple of minutes for some questions. So we've got a question in the chat. I guess when submitting pitches, etc., you need to get used to rejection. Do you have any tips for coping with being rejected?
Well, I think unfortunately rejection is a big part of life as a scientist. You know, so much of what we do gets rejected. I think use it as a learning experience. If you are going to be rejected, often take the time perhaps to follow up and say, why was it rejected? Is the topic not relevant? Was it not written properly? What can I do to improve? So try and get that feedback, and perhaps based on that feedback, then try and make improvements, and either try again at the same place if they seem like they're open to it, or then go elsewhere. But don't be afraid of rejection. It's normal. Try and learn from it and sort of move on.
Fantastic. And one final question, would you advise on getting your mentor or supervisor to review your writing and feedback to you?
Yes, definitely. It never hurts, does it? I think it's always good to sort of get some extra input and to sort of see what you think. On the other hand, also be aware that different people have different writing styles. I know that some of my colleagues have more verbose writing styles, whereas I have a more crisp, simple writing style, and that's okay. You know, if we all had the same writing style, then it would be a bit boring. So yes, definitely get feedback, but don't feel as if you have to have the complete same writing style as your supervisor. Like I said, sort of try and find your own voice.